Hello and welcome to the show. I, for one, can't help but love the crazy world of the ultra-fast super saloon. Cars like this Lotus Carlton, for example, at a time when the fastest, the most exclusive, the most exciting of supercars in the world were just about managing to crack the 200-mile-an-hour mark. Lotus took what was a fairly mundane, fairly everyday saloon car, the Vauxhall Carlton, changed just about everything with it, and made it do almost 180 miles an hour. The four-door saloon car was able to accelerate on par with the most expensive of supercars. It was able to almost keep up with them in terms of top speed. And that is bonkers. This is, let's not forget, for a car that looked fairly similar to, again, the standard mundane everyday road car that you would see, but could out-accelerate Ferraris. And while, of course, around the corners the Porsches and Lamborghinis and so on of the world would be quicker than it, Lotus had tinkered with the suspension, and the Carlton is an awful lot of fun to throw through the corners. It's a remarkable car, and I can't help but always want to talk about it because it's just such a fantastically, ludicrously crazy vehicle. And while BMW would eventually build four-door saloon cars to go faster than this, it did hold the record for a considerable amount of time. And perhaps to me, this will always be one of the highlights, one of the craziest of the four-door saloons. Today, though, we're going to be talking about something a little bit different, the Audi RS7. Now, I'm doing this review, I'm using this car specifically because during a recent lucky dip race, someone was drawn to in one of these vehicles. And they didn't like it at all. There was a lot of complaining, and said Audi managed to plummet all the way through the field. And I was wondering, could it really be that bad? As far as cars go to look at, I don't dislike the RS7. The front, I think, is considerably better looking. The back, sort of, from the front it looks like, you know, a normal, nice proportioned sports car, and then you get round to the back that sort of looks like they forgot to kind of finish the design. I don't know, it's the back of the RS7 does look rather weird and sort of hastily finished, but there we go. The interior looks like it's got more buttons on it than a space shuttle. It looks rather busy in there. It looks very, very busy in there. But overall, I wouldn't have said it was a particularly bad-looking car. And continuing the theme with the Carlton, I mean, performance figure-wise, the Audi is certainly plenty impressive enough. 550 horsepower, 550 torque from the V8 here. And that means it'll be doing 60 in under 4 seconds. It'll be doing 100 in less than 9 in its top speed, while I suspect in real life it is electronically limited, thanks to the German manufacturer's kind of gentleman agreement to 155. In the world of Forza, we don't have to worry about those limiters, and the Audi will do 206. So in terms of figures that could scare a supercar, the Audi, yeah, is definitely very much there. And again, it's in a car that doesn't shout, look at me, I am very, very quick. It is a relatively refined looking vehicle. So those stats looking promising for the RS7. There is, however, a problem. There is one particular stat that we haven't covered, and that is the weight of all of this. 4,300 pounds, making the Audi a rather heavy vehicle. And while it's not too bad through the corners, it's actually not a terrible handling car. It is a little bit understeering, as you can imagine, for such a big vehicle. When you get to the tighter, twistier sections, it's not the best at changing direction. It's not awful. It's not completely and utterly awful through the corners themselves. It's the brakes that struggle. Trying to get confidence in this car is very, very difficult because you never really trust that it's going to get slowed down. Yes, it might have very big brakes, but there is so much momentum going on because of the level of speed that you can get from this car and the amount of weight that it has. You just never really have much confidence that it will be able to get slowed down. You have to brake incredibly early, comparatively, with this, that it's struggles around a lap of a second. It's why we saw it plummet down the order in the lucky dip racing, because yeah, it's got the acceleration. It's got the acceleration absolutely to keep up with the sports cars and with the supercars, but you really don't have any confidence in it when it gets to, well, to the braking zones. However, of course, the Audi was going to have a go around our Yas Marina test track. Off the line, that all-wheel drive launch is going to be helpful. When you can get to 60 as quickly as the Audi does, when you have the amount of power the RS7 does, and an awful lot of traction, yeah, you're going to be quick down in towards that first corner, but then we have a lot of these quite narrow, quite twisty sections. Across the curbs, actually, the Audi is very good. It looks like it bobbles around a lot from the replay camera, but driving it, no issues whatsoever. In fact, one of the best I've had in terms of dealing with curbs. Through this fast double right, we're unlikely to see any ludicrous oversteering moments, of course, from the Audi, but again, you have to be very, very early on the brakes. And you have to be patient. While, yes, there is a lot of traction, as you're not going to be seeing sideways shenanigans, you can use a lot of that 550 horsepower out of these slower corners. You try and use it a little bit too early, you're going to understeer your way straight off into a wall. So you've got to be a little bit patient with this car, and you've got to make sure you are early on the brakes. Slow into a corner and fast out of the corners is definitely the way to go with a vehicle like this one. Because, yeah, just don't have the confidence with the brakes. And then, well, out of that final turn, while it is a relatively slow hairpin, again, no traction issues for the Audi, can make the most of all of that power, all of that torque. And then on a flying lap, didn't really know where to brake for the first part, guess-worked it, got it wrong, and ended up running out a bit wide. It's something quite common that'll happen with the RS7s. The lap time itself, 1:14.0, puts the Audi into 15th place. It is about a second and a half down on the BMW i8. It is about 1.3 down on the Lotus Evora. The more interesting stat, it only beats the Ford Falcon by half a second. And that half a second, I would imagine, is completely made up with the launch. The Falcon is the better car in terms of having fun to drive it. The Falcon is the better car through the corners. The Audi has the power, and the Audi has the acceleration off the line, and probably out of the final hairpin, and even out of some of the slower corners. However, yeah, the Falcon would be the better of the two cars to drive. So, at this point, I was struggling to find almost a purpose in some ways of the RS7. Could doing a one-make race prove to be interesting with these cars? We didn't really know how this one was going to pan out, with the Audi being a bit of a difficult car to drive. Everybody got through turn 1 cleanly. Through turn 2 they were busy going 3 wide, just about managing to sort it out. I don't think you want to be 3 wide through the third corner there. Someone's gone skating across the grass in the background. Up until this point, everything going relatively well, but the first serious big test in towards the hairpin. Now, we had a practice race, so we did roughly know what to expect with the cars, but even then, there is some real struggles for getting stopped, as almost everybody at the front pack misses the braking point. There's a little bit of lag and ghosting, and someone's car gets bopped up onto 2 wheels. There was, yeah, a little bit of bumping going on through the hairpin. On the most part, though, vehicles would make it through. It was always going to be the tough point. You're on cold tyres at that stage in the race, and you're racing with other vehicles, trying to judge the braking points with a car that just doesn't really want to get slowed down. Of course, we are all very much in the same boat here. We're all dealing with the same difficulties with the brakes, the same amount of understeer. And of course, as we've seen time and time again, you do a one-make race and you're going to have hopefully an awful lot of close racing. And sure enough, that's what was happening at the front. The kind of bronzy-coloured car that we are following here, having to try and get brave at the hairpin, hold it the long way round. You can just about make that work. Sometimes you'll be on the inside for the final couple of corners, and sure enough, he gets himself alongside for the final turn. Car on the outside still not going to give that one up. Eventually just runs out of grip as the rest of the train would follow around. The second time of asking, the hairpin, well, we're all a little bit more spread out. We've all kind of got a rough idea as to what the cars can do under brakes, but the problem is you're battling with other vehicles. You're trying to push it that smidge bit further, and that's when things go wrong with the Audi. When you ask that metre or two later on the brakes, that's when it really struggles. The poor white car that we were following here is trying to get turned in as a car behind just can't get the vehicle stopped in time. He would have made the corner, but again, with the concertina effect of the hairpin, the poor white car gets a clobbering and goes for a spin. And if you'd made that little mistake in another car, in any of the other modern super saloons, you might have got away with it. If you'd braked that, 5 meters too late, you could probably have survived it. But with this, it's such a fine line, such a very fine line between making a stop and, well, in that case, not, that, yeah, we would see more of those sort of incidents. I mean, there were still some very, very good overtakes. The red Audi here go around the outside. One of the tougher corners to go around the outside of a vehicle would move him up into a 5th place. There was still, some exciting racing going on. At the front, it was still now becoming a 3-way battle. The bronze car trying to hold on to the lead, but was struggling a little bit for pace, coming under threat from its 2 vehicles. The red Audi now up into a 4th place behind. And again, a lot of your lap time, I say a lot of your lap time, but you could make up a lot of time with the brakes in this car. If you could get things absolutely perfect, that is where you were making some big gains over the competition. That meant the hairpin was a vitally, vitally important corner. You see some locking up going on. Someone on the outside trying to make it 3 wide. The bronze car can't quite get it slowed down. Everybody's going for cutbacks on the exit. The wooden car's got a little bit lost. I mean, I would like to think that we are all pretty experienced drivers, good drivers. We're used to racing cars and we've done many a clean race. We've never had so many difficulties in getting cars stopped for fast corners. It's just not happened. The grey car that we are following here eventually would manage to pull alongside. It's another good overtake to move himself up into the lead. The bronze car still trying to fight again alongside, looking for a way to get back in it. Just runs out of grip for that long way round. Has a think about getting up the inside at the next corner. It's a fast corner, a difficult one to go too wide in the best handling of cars, let alone in these things. I was also one that was really struggling to get the cars slow down, more locking up further back, more cars escaping the circuit at the hairpin. I saw somebody was really struggling to pull it up in time, left them plenty of space to go shooting off into the runoff area, and I got the hairpin right that time around. Unfortunately for me, didn't get the next corner right. It was a big group of cars. I carried a lot of speed, realised I wasn't stopping, bailed out and decided that the tyre bundle was a better place to put my car. If I hadn't, I'd have just fired it straight into the pack. Completely, accidentally, and it's my fault for asking too much of the car. But you are seeing a lot more because it was so much easier to do with this Audi than a lot of other vehicles that we've driven before. All it takes, again, as I said, all it takes is a couple of meters too late, that little bit too brave, and you have such a big problem with the vehicle. And this is, let's not forget, in terms of Forza classes, relatively high class, but it's up into A class. And the sort of vehicles that it was being drawn against, certainly in terms of the Lucky Dip races, against some of the sports cars, the likes of the Lotus of the Vora and that kind of vehicle. In fact, I think Vora's a very high B class, in fact, not even an A class car. And this just can't compete. Again, lots of locking up from the vehicles ahead as people are really, really struggling to get the vehicle slowed down into the hairpin. That time it was the leader with everything locked up. The bronze car not quite able to make a move stick. Again, we were having there was some entertaining racing. We were having some good fun racing with the cars, because you often always will with a single make race, but there was a lot more silly errors, especially with the braking, than we would usually see from the cars. The leader managed to get a little bit of a reprieve, this red Audi finding a way again around the outside. The bronze car was a little too tight to the inside one of the corners, made himself slow off of the turn. Little mistakes in single make races are again something that will often be punished as we head up towards the next hairpin. This sort of top 5 were managing to pull a little bit of a margin over the rest of us. Of course, as group further back, we were rather fighting for around 10th place, and that is going to slow us down as well. The car we're riding on board with quite wide on the way in to the kind of first part of these 2 corners. The bronze car's trying to sneak his way up the inside, unable to make anything stick down there as they cross the line on to another lap here. Turn 1 is quite a scary turn. It's a very, very fast corner through there, and one that's easy to get yourself into a lot of trouble. And even these guys that were running at the front weren't immune to the panicking, oh crap, things are going wrong under brakes. The red Audi, just a smidge too late on the brakes into turn 2. Can't get it stopped. It doesn't have anywhere to go. They all get away with it pretty well at this stage. Didn't have to bail into a tyre bundle like I did. But again, even the fastest drivers in this race were struggling with dealing with the brakes, and this was after a number of laps, after practice races and so on, and still was struggling to get to grips with slowing the cars down. More lock-ups from the leader. There's somebody, one of the other grey Audis is on the outside of the hairpin. Not really too many places to go there with such a tight group of cars. They come out the other side all okay, but yeah, it was a real interesting handful to go driving with. I was in the middle of a big pack fighting further back. As I said, this was the group for around 10th place that had spent a fair bit of time exploring the limits, shall we say, of the Audi. And yeah, by the end of the race, we were a bit more competent, a bit more used to what we were having to deal with in these cars. Still wasn't easy. Still wasn't easy whatsoever. Again, it was nice to be, part of these packs of cars fighting for position. I had kind of adopted a tactic of hug the inside and let anybody that was struggling to slow down run really, really wide. It kind of worked. I mean, it made me a little bit slow in terms of lap time, but it kept me out of trouble in terms of the race itself, as they're going to go and run side by side again through another fast corner. I was quite impressed by the amount of sort of too wide we were seeing in vehicles that aren't necessarily the easiest to get through some of these corners. There was certainly plenty of bravery in going too wide and fitting too wide through some tough corners. I mean, Hockenheim, I like the Hockenheim circuit. It's a good place for getting overtakes because so many corners are good overtaking spots. And I perhaps wasn't expecting so many changes of position with the Audis. In the end, it would be the grey RS7 that would take victory. The bronze and red car would have a bit of a laggy collision that would unfortunately drop them down a few positions. But in total, the racing at the front had been plenty entertaining enough, and there hadn't been huge gaps formed, even with the various battles. You can kind of see that the train of cars as they come around the final on towards the cooldown, that big two-wheel moment for the leader across the curb there. I was in the biggest of battles on the final time around, trying to get myself up into a 10th place, trying to be brave under brakes in a car that I'd not been enjoying particularly for a large amount of time. Managed to get the matte grey car up the inside, got the position. Unfortunately, I just couldn't get it far enough across into the second to last corner. The red car would fire up the inside, but I had a plan. You kind of pin your opponent down to the inside around the final turn. You don't let them get a good run off the corner, so they can't get the power down as well as possible. That would allow me past, would allow a white car behind as well to make up the position, all because I pinned the vehicle down on the inside. We would have had a fun race, but that was more to do with the group of people racing identical cars than the car itself. I still struggling to find almost purpose in some ways for the RS7, perhaps as a more luxurious car with a lot of power and to go quickly. But then when you get to the interior, while it's not a horrendous place to be, I mean, you got carbon fibre on the door panels. I mean, I'd hardly say that was the height of luxury in here. Again, it's not a bad interior, but for a luxurious performance car, do you really want to be having just, random bits of exposed carbon fibre across the doors, across the dashboard? And yes, of course, you have carbon fibre wing mirrors. It seems a bit of a confused car. You're dressing up a boat as a sports car, and while it's certainly got the engine to go with it, it's got that straight line speed underneath, it's still a bit of a barge, and it's still got a fair few drawbacks. Truth be told, the performance saloon section has got an awful lot of competition these days, and the RS7 can only just about beat a Ford Falcon. And don't get me wrong, the Ford Falcon is a very good car in its own right, but that's hardly towards the top of the high-performance super saloons, and the RS7 can only just about beat it. So, as far as a purpose for this car goes, I'm still very much struggling to find one. It does make a glorious noise, that is very true, but it's not that good a noise. It's not that good a noise to justify the entire car. There are vehicles that handle better than it. Yes, it's fast in a straight line, but there are those that will equal it or probably beat it in terms of straight line speed. I think there are better looking cars out there. There are certainly a lot more fun cars to drive. It's not a terrible car. The RS7 is a completely, utterly awful vehicle. However, there are considerably better cars out there in terms of super saloons in just about every single possible way. In terms of an A-class car as well, the RS7 is a bit underpowered. A lot of its PI is made up by its huge acceleration. Yeah, it's fast getting going, but it will be beaten by a B-class Lotus around a track. It's, yeah, not massively fast when it gets to the corners, and yeah, we had fun in a single-make race, and we had more overtaking than I perhaps initially expected us to with this car. But we often have fun with whatever we race in a single-make race. The difficulties were still very plain to see, and we probably would have had more entertaining fun with a different car. So, yeah, the RS7, overall, not a particularly spectacular car in just about any area, I am afraid to say. Although the soundtrack is, yeah, still pretty damn good.